So hello everyone, there's a large number of people on the call, so I'm going to ask that you turn off your video screens if you can. You can do that by clicking the button in the bottom or by hitting Control E on your keyboard. You should also mute your screens. And I'm going to wait a few minutes. What happened last night, I'm not able to let people in after I start sharing my screen. And so unfortunately, there were people that were trying to get in a few minutes late who couldn't get in for, they missed the first part of the presentation. So I'm going to give a little bit longer than I did last night to allow some people come, but I did send a reminder asking people to come early. So it's great to see so many people on the call already. But I will wait just a few more moments here to do that. So again, if you can shut off your screen by doing Control E or by hitting the small camera icon at the bottom center of your screen, that will save some of the bandwidth on the call, and it is helpful. So I'll be letting some folks in and checking in. We'll probably start. I'll give it about 10:04, 10:05 when we officially begin. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. So my executive assistant, Ann Lindell, is going to be able to support letting people in. So she's going to be able to admit people, which is great. So we can begin. We are you should see my screen so that some of you may need to click on a slide that's my name, but says sharing the screen. So that way you're able to see the screen, but you should be able to see a presentation. I'm going to start with about 15 minutes or so just to answer some general questions. I know that Ann, my executive assistant, is like a groupie following me like I'm the Grateful Dead. I've been doing these calls. I did parent call yesterday, student call. I've done teacher call. I've done teacher call at each level. I did the Board of Health last night. So there's been a lot of these things. So forgive me if I forget something or otherwise repeat myself as I'm getting caught in doing quite a bit of these. But I think I have addressed in the slides a foundational level of some of the main questions that are out there. And then what we'll do after that period is we'll take some questions or comments, and I will go through those questions as well. And the way that will work is there's a chat window, and you can put your name in the chat box, and I can call on you. And if that doesn't work, you can text your question into the box. And if you're calling in on the phone, there's a couple of things you could do. You could either you could try to contact someone else who is in there, and they could add your name, and I can call on you. And if it gets to that point where you need to ask a question from the phone and there's no other way, you could unmute yourself. But I'm just going to remind folks, if you could hit Control-E on your computer to turn off your camera, because if everyone has their cameras off, it should be provide better audio for everybody on the call. And if you could mute yourself as well, that would be wonderful. So great. So I'm bringing you through the slides here. Today is the second day of the parent forums. I also shared out this meeting is being recorded, as was last night. So if there's some different questions that come up, they should be able to be addressed there. So just to follow through our reopening timeline, we were proactive in bringing a group together in early June. That group was well represented from parents. There were parent representatives from every school. There are Special Education Parents Association parents as well. There are teachers union, all of our various staff groups, paraprofessionals, food service, administrative assistants, custodians, and there were administrators, our town physician, our school nurse, Board of Health members, other town officials, police, fire, safety have been a part of those groups as well. And so we've had a really representative group that looked at this conversation and has tried to come up with the best plan and the safest plan for our students based on all the information and data that's available to us. So by July 31st, we needed to submit our initial draft to the Department of Education for approval. And so we, at a school committee meeting on July 30th, we put forward the plan for a hybrid opening, which I'm going to explain more in a few moments. That passed on a 3-2 vote. And my feeling from the deliberation was that the dissenting votes were that there was a lot of support for doing even more in person from our community and from our committee. And so I think that it did pass, but there is certainly a commitment to doing as much in-person learning as possible in the safest way possible in North Reading, and that's what we're putting forward. And what I shared out on July 31st was our hybrid plan with folks. And from here, from now to next week's meeting, or I guess, I'm sorry, this week's meeting, Friday morning's meeting, is to get additional feedback through these forums and through some of the survey questions we've asked to help us come up with the best plan for reopening. So we're doing the forums today with staff, students, and families. We have submitted to the Department of Ed the initial plan, and we're going to get feedback from them hopefully today with any suggestions or changes to our model from the Department of Ed. We will then submit all of that. Our principals are working on a lot more detail to flesh out what the procedures and protocols look like in each building. You're going to see, you're going to hear from special education, from digital learning, from our food service and busing, and all of those different elements will be outlined in the plan that gets shared and approved on August 7th, hopefully approved. And then depending on how much feedback or work needs to be done to make changes, I will communicate that out with the full community on or around August 10th. September 1st is the first day for staff, so that's a change. So one of the things that the commissioner was able to do based on negotiations at the state level with the Massachusetts Teachers Association was to have additional days of training for staff. Teachers are being asked to teach in a way that they've never done before, and to do that well and to do that effectively, they want additional days that includes, obviously health and safety training, and certainly collaboration time and consultation with our digital learning experts on the best ways to connect with students in this hybrid environment. And so there are 10 days for staff. Staff were originally coming back on the 8th of September and students coming back on the 9th. We're asking staff to come back on September 1st, and then working toward students coming back on the 17th. So I do need a waiver for that. I've put in for that waiver for one additional day. Students, according to what the commissioner put out, was that all students needed to begin on the 16th of September, no later than the 16th of September. But since we traditionally start after Labor Day, we have proposed that we do one day later, so the students come back on the 17th. And when you see the model that I'm about to share with you, it's a clean start for us, starting on a Thursday. It would just be the cohort B would start on the Thursday, as opposed to starting a different day of the week. Monday obviously would also be a clean start, but we feel those extra few days with students is key. So there would be a change to the calendar on the other end as well, because the student year has been shortened to 170 days. We would be getting out for students around June 16th. That's with no snow days. But an interesting thing to think about as we're doing remote learning now, as a part of our hybrid plan, if we were in a full remote learning day because of a typical snow day, we could count that as a day, and then we wouldn't have to make those days up. So on days when, obviously if there's a catastrophic event where there's no power, that's going to be difficult to do as a remote learning day. But I think if we're able to do remote learning the way we do it on other days for students, we could do that and power through, we'll say, for the snow days this year. So that's something to think about. So the way our model that we put forward for the cohorts, there's cohort A, B, C, and D. So cohort A and B would be coming in person. Approximately 50% of the instruction is in person and 50% is remote throughout the week. So our model would be the cohort A attends on Mondays and Tuesdays, cohort B attends Thursday and Friday, and on Wednesdays we would be alternating cohort A and cohort B. So it may be as simple as 1 week is cohort A going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then B going Thursday, Friday. The next week it might flip. We may also consider things like if there's a Monday holiday and cohort A now has lost a day, that maybe on that particular week they would be the ones attending Tuesday and Wednesday. So those things we're still working out. Those schedules will be worked out by the building principals and should be a part of our plan moving forward. We're going to try and balance it as much as possible so that students are getting a similar number of days in person and remote. Cohort C, this is a place I really want to clarify. This is not every single student on an IEP, but if we think of our highest priority students, they would be receiving in-person instruction each day. And so we have substantially separate special education programs. Think of it where students are outside of their inclusion classroom for at least 75% of their day. A lot of these programs are named programs. Our RISE program comes to mind. So parents that are in those specific programs will be getting additional communication, and that all is coming very soon. I know there's a lot of questions about which students does this apply to, and being careful and clear on that. Students who are English language learners, students who are homeless or in foster care, and also our pre-K students. And the pre-K students, a lot of that has to do with special education as well, because our early intervention programs for students transitions them from age 3 into pre-K, and that's why there's a large emphasis on having those students in person as well. My goal and my understanding is that the students that have the largest challenge with remote learning are our youngest students. So we're going to really try to get our kindergarten and first grade in person as much as possible. And we have some different ways that we're trying to approach that. Nothing has been decided yet, but if I were to be able to bring more students in every day in small groups in person, may not be with their the same teacher every day, but certainly in person, being able to check in with their classroom teacher every day. I'm going to try to do that with our youngest learners first. So those are things that we're hard at work on now. And then cohort D are students who are in a full remote model every day. In my mind, cohorts A, B, and D are working with the same teachers and are a part of the same class as they would typically be as assigned. So this is a sample schedule for the elementary school. On a Monday, cohort A is in person, cohort B is remote, cohort C is in person, and cohort D is remote. And then it would switch on the Wednesdays, and on Thursday we would switch over completely to cohort B. So the difference, the majority of students are going to be in cohorts A and B, and when those students switch from remote to in person, that is when we would do an additional cleaning of the buildings and all those touch points as we're changing over a lot of the bodies that are coming into the building on those days. At the middle school, a very similar schedule. But what would happen is we would have the additional variable of they have different schedules on different days, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And we believe with this model, the schedule will just run. So a day will be designated as day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And students will be in person on whatever day it is according to the calendar. That will be the day that they'll follow. And they will have, we're going to look at the schedule, and hopefully we're going to balance this out, that students are getting a certain number of day 1s, day 2s, days 3s, and days 4 in person. Similar for the high school, it's a 2-day schedule of green gold that would be pre-established from the beginning of the year, and we would run through our calendar, green gold, green gold, green gold. Students would be in person on the days of the week, and they would be in person for a certain number of green and a certain number of gold. Excuse me. And so that would continue throughout the year. So this is a 30,000-foot overview of how we would be using those 10 days. There's been some questions from the community about what that would look like. We're thinking of those first few days starting off the year with a lot of the safety protocols, classroom setup, and the building protocols specific to each building on those first few days of school, September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. On September 8th, 9th, and 10th, that second week, would be a lot of intensive instruction around digital learning best practices. We will be talking about social justice, which is another important topic of the summer, and our teachers certainly want to think about that and make sure we're addressing that as well. But plenty of time for our teachers to come together and collaborate with their content area experts and also their digital learning experts and special education leaders and teachers working together to collaborate and plan curriculum for what is, as I mentioned before, a very different assignment going into this year, and making sure they have time to do that well. I see September 14th, 15th, and 16th as a continuation of that collaboration and curriculum work, but also scheduling some very small group student walkthroughs. So the ability for maybe, let's just say the 6th graders to come in on one day on the bus. Maybe they're in school for an hour. The 6th grade alone learns about the building, gets to walk through, meets some of the teachers, understands that there's going to be a different place you enter this year. There's going to be a different place you exit. There's going to be a one-way hallway, to see how lunch is going to work, to see how dismissal is going to work and arrival. And to do that in much smaller groups than all of the students, or let's say half of the students who would be coming now on September 7th. So the idea is throughout that week, we would be working in, and possibly some other days as well, to be working in some smaller groups at every level to become acclimated to the different surroundings for this year. September 17th then would be the first day of our hybrid model. So cohorts B and C would be in person, and A and D would be remote. And then we do 2 days of that. And then on Monday, that would be cohorts A and C in person and cohorts B and D in remote. So that is our proposal now for the beginning of the year. So just some big picture items that I want to make sure is clear with everyone. There are health and safety requirements. Masks is a topic that we've spent quite a lot of time. I've talked to a lot of parents and students about concerns about masks on really both sides. Folks concerned to make sure everyone's wearing a mask, and also folks concerned that there are going to be some students who cannot wear a mask due to a disability or a sensory issue. And then other folks that are just concerned in general about students should be wearing masks, but it's going to be very difficult for them to keep their masks on. And so something that we've really pushed forward with, we are going to have a recommendation that all students are wearing masks as a best practice. It's required for all students from the department guidelines in grades 2 and above. I think it makes sense for us, and I checked in with the Board of Health on this last night. They agree to have a requirement for all students to wear masks, but under that requirement, to have very clear practices. This is not going to be a discipline issue if a student's mask falls down. I don't want a student to have their nose pop out as it does when my son wears a mask, and I have to remind him, cover your nose. I don't want that student sitting there all day fearing that, oh no, now I have COVID. Oh no, now I've exposed my class. Oh no, I've done something wrong. We want to be very clear that we're being inclusive of those students who are unable to wear a mask for whatever reason throughout the day. I'm just going to silence this so we don't hear that ringing. Sorry about that. And I think that's very important for us to communicate out to folks as well. I'm sorry, I just lost my place. Thank you. And so I think that's very important. I will share a slide in a little bit more about masks, but I just want you to know, as the community, I've heard from some very focal groups about masks and some of the harmful effects of masks. I've communicated that viewpoint out. I think that some of the, I'm not saying single-handedly, but I think North Reading's voice was heard. And I know that the commissioner directly addressed my questions with me and on calls with all superintendents. I have seen some language shifts in some of the guidance documents that come out, specifically addressing the students with disabilities and those that can't wear a mask, that still need to be fully included and not be made to, I'll use the term, mask shamed, right? If a student is not wearing a mask for a disability or a medical reason, we want to make sure that we're being inclusive and coming up with a way that those students can safely be in a classroom and included, but also at a safe distance where not having a mask is not an issue. So that's important. I wanted to make sure I addressed that. Hand washing and sanitizing is absolutely to be practiced with our students. There will be mask breaks throughout the day. We'll get students outside as much as possible, and in situations where they're more than 6 feet apart, where they can take a break if they need to throughout the day. But we're going to emphasize the importance of hand washing and sanitizing. There's more stations throughout the buildings than ever before. We have some incredible cleaning and disinfecting protocols. Our custodians have been given some training. They've been given additional tools, and we have additional ventilation systems. We're doing a check of all of our HVAC systems throughout the buildings, and we're also purchasing some new equipment, some ionizers and things like that for the nurses' spaces and for some other spaces in the buildings to help cut down what's in the air. So we're doing many, many things. We're investing heavily in that as well. We're going to continue to emphasize the physical distancing. So the hybrid model allows for students to return at 6 foot. That's why it's half the students, because we can't fit all of our students in at 6 foot distance, but we feel that that is a good, safe distance to move our students forward. The busing, when we saw the busing guidelines come out and how we had to distance students on buses, we would not be able to transfer all of our students who want busing if we were to do it at 3 foot and have everyone in. So we felt that it was a better model to have the 6 foot distance to get as many students on the busing as possible and to meet those needs. Ventilation is another area that we're trying to follow. We want to make sure that we have windows that can open. We're testing all of our HVAC systems mechanically right now, and we're running and making sure that those processes are in place. If there's an issue in a classroom where the window is not opening or doesn't have good ventilation, we're going to look into finding solutions for that space and or finding a different location for those classes to meet. And as I mentioned before, getting outside as much as possible, having students, especially in the nice weather, going for learning walks or taking some time to experience outdoor learning, I think is going to be recommended whenever feasible. The cohorts themselves, by having students in smaller groups, is going to be a way to help prevent some transmission of germs and COVID. At the elementary level and at the middle school level, students are not going to be rotating classes. They're going to be coming in, staying in a small group, and the teachers are going to be pushing into the rooms, as opposed to the students moving from class to class. At the high school, we feel that the only way to really do the high school schedule as designed is to allow students to move between classes. That will allow us to get all the electives and all of the different offerings that we have for students. However, we do believe that at that level, students are going to be able to be more responsible for some of their own cleaning, and in a very guided way, we're going to transition classes safely and have a lot of cleaning in between all those transitions. As I mentioned before, there will be many movement protocols throughout the buildings, different entrances and exits, maps on the floor, similar if you've been in a supermarket where there's one-way streets, and all of that done for reasons of safety to try to limit traffic and folks coming into too close contact with one another. There will be the use of lockers, if it exists, will be very different. You're not going to have students coming in the morning and congregating around lockers, which are at a very close distance. So principals will be communicating out through our reopening plan on the 10th some specifics around the process, if there are lockers, what it will look like and how it'll be used. But certainly don't want to have the traditional idea of middle school students all coming in the morning and standing by their lockers at a close distance. So we're really going to have some processes in place to try and keep students at that safe distance. So some of the major questions that are out there that I just want to address before I take some questions. Athletics and arts, the earliest that sports can begin is September 14th. There's going to be more guidance coming on sports. I've heard everything about what sports are offered at what time. This is not going to be a North Reading decision. This is going to be a decision at a much higher level. But folks are saying that a sport like golf or cross country might be easier to play and maintain safe social distancing than wrestling or football. And so I've heard about some ideas about sports being offered in different seasons or different sports being offered, and we will communicate that out as soon as more becomes clear. But right now, the MIAA, which is the Massachusetts Association, has said that nothing, including practices, can begin until September 14th. There are some very strict guidelines around performing arts, PE. Some of those cannot be offered inside at all. Some of them can only be offered outside, but they can be offered outside at 10 feet, at 6 feet, and some of them can be offered inside at 10 feet and 6 feet as well. The arts, there's some concerns about sharing of materials. So I will say that those guidelines, within a day of those guidelines and restrictions coming out, our leaders curriculum leaders in all those areas were very responsive with, here's a way that we can continue to offer these great electives. We fully understand, I fully understand and recognize how important the whole child education is, educating students. And for some students, it's that chorus or band class that gets them up in the morning and gets them into school. And we want to offer those electives and those opportunities for students. When we talk about the extracurriculars, I think they will look different this year, but I'm confident that we're going to find a way. It might be a different time of year. It might be a slightly different type of production, but we do want to have some of those, musicals at the middle school and the high school, or chorus and band activities. We need to do that in a safe way, but we want to continue to do that. So we have a lot of different ideas about how to do that as well. In generally, when we divide up our cohorts, they're going to be with their siblings. You were given the option to indicate that you did not want to be with your sibling, and if you entered NA, then I will assume that if you have a sibling that you will be divided up that way. We are not able to divide the cohorts by choice. The drivers for cohorts need to be, we're going to start with the middle school. The middle school has the most variables, and so they're going to divide their cohorts, and let's say they start with some kind of an alphabetical split of the alphabet, A through K, L through Z, something like that, and see how that works. And then they'll share that list, and they're doing this now with the middle school, with the high school, with the elementary, to make sure that they're able to split their classes to allow an older sibling to be home with a younger sibling, or for a parent to have an idea that my students are going to be in school on these days and home on these days, to the extent feasible. There are some cases where people don't want that, where they specifically want their siblings on different days so they can have one student home each day and they can work with them better, or they want twins split up or something like that. And I think that's perfectly reasonable, and that's why we've allowed for that through the survey tool to be indicated. On a second level, there are some people that have brought to our attention transportation questions. If my last name starts with A and the person I transfer with is in Z, is there any way we can make those accommodations? And my suggestion would be, if those particulars pop up, to reach out to a building principal, and we will try our best to make those kind of accommodations. But we cannot get to a place where people are picking and choosing whether they want to be cohort A or cohort B. We don't feel that that's sustainable. But that said, we will try to make as many accommodations as possible to make this work for folks. I understand how challenging that can be. Just to be clear, I'm not sure I said this earlier, but when we submitted our plan and when I disclosed the full reopening plan, we were asked by the department to come up with a full in-person model, a full hybrid model, and a full remote model. We may need to use all of those at some point during this year. And if there is an outbreak in our schools, if we hit certain thresholds, what I'm hearing is there may be more information coming soon from the state about what those thresholds are. But right now we are, the numbers that I've heard, we are certainly under those numbers in North Reading, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to safely at 6 feet deliver in-person instruction to our students in the hybrid model. But there may be an occasion where we have to go to full remote, or there may be an occasion where we're able to move to more students coming back in person, and those thresholds will be happening throughout the year. One thing that we are exploring as well is remote learning assistance and some enhancements. There's going to be enhancements for what remote learning is. What it looked like in the past will not be the case. Things that are going to absolutely be a part of remote learning now are more synchronous check-ins with students. So it's not going to be on your remote learning day, kids are on their own doing some busy work or some homework to catch up with what they learned when they were in person. Those students who are in cohort D, I imagine, are getting the remote learning every day. And to me, in my mindset, they're in the same classroom as they typically would have been in, and they're just conducting and interacting with their class and their teacher remotely. That's the model that I'm suggesting for our teachers to think about. That then allows us to continue to offer all of our extracurriculars and our specialists without having to think about if we have to come up with a plan that has our teachers doubling up and some teachers doing remote and some doing in person. I think that's when you start having conversations around, can my art teacher really teach art, or do I need that art now to help work with a cohort of students doing math or ELA? And that's not ideal for anyone, and I hope that we can get to a place where folks are following their regular schedule to the extent possible. But there will be enhancements. There will be attendance taken. It'll be differentiated, whether it's an in-person day for a student or a remote day for a student. There will be grades given this year. There will be many other aspects of remote learning that will look a lot more similar to a typical school year than perhaps we saw in the spring. And we're also exploring the possibility for some remote learning assistance, whether that's through community partners like the YMCA. And what that would look like is on the days when students are home, if both parents are working and they're not able to have their students, we may be able to get them into a situation where there's someone there to help facilitate that remote learning on those days. So that's something we're looking at. Whether that's a cost model or not depends upon really the numbers of people that are looking to do that and what we're able to do. But I think that for some working parents, that might be a good option that we can consider. I know I've also heard from some that are taking upon themselves to hire remote learning assistants. They're doing these pods where they're hiring a retired teacher to assist on those days. And if that's the case, I would try my best to facilitate and make connections with those folks as well, because I think having assistance on those remote learning days will be very helpful to our families. The busing and kindergarten fees, we will do a separate call just around kindergarten as a topic, because I think there's so many questions that have come up between full day kindergarten and half day kindergarten. I certainly think that we're willing to discuss and think about some of the fees. As many of you know, there's a tuition for the kindergarten program. The deadlines for all of our fees are still in. We're holding to those deadlines of August 1st for people to make their first payments. But what is a little different this year is we will offer an extension on the time you can get a refund. We do feel that by that point, by September, you will know clearly what the program looks like. And if that's not something that you want to participate in, we can certainly understand why people would want to move. But I think there will be some discussion around, some conversation around the differences in the fees based on the differences in the program. But I think it's important to realize that even though the students are remote, the teachers are still teaching remotely and the teachers are still being paid, and those fees are used to sustain our program. And so if we start changing that, we're not able to really support the program as we've built. So we have to come up with a way to make that work. But I think I've gone on record as saying that, you know, kindergarten fees and tuition full day K is something I want to move away from as part of a long-term goal anyway. And so if we can start thinking about how that looks differently this year, I'm certainly willing to begin that conversation. Similar with busing, I fully understand that with busing, the product that you're looking when you pay for a bus fee, if your child lives beyond a certain distance, you're paying for a bus fee that is 5 days a week of transportation. And if you find out that your student now is only coming to school 3 days a week, why am I paying for 5 days worth of busing? I understand that, and I also want to make clear that two things. Number one, the product is going to be different this year in that the busing services are going to include bus monitors and also cleaning of buses in between every run of the buses, which has a large cost to it. So there are more costs this year to fully fund our busing program. I also think that there are needs that if we were to not have the busing fee or to change the busing fee, we then would probably be faced with having to go back to, which many districts are, only being able to offer busing to those for whom it's required, those students that are within 2 miles and those students that are up through grade 6. Our goal is to try to continue to do busing for everyone who's requested it. We believe we can do that safely now, but the fee structure does need to remain in place. But we can continue to have additional conversations around that, as I do understand the concern if busing looks different, why would it be the same fee? So I hope I answered that a little bit, but I'm sure there's some more questions. This is just a slide that I'll leave up there. This is from the Parabola project out of Harvard, just reinstating and you know, more data that's confirming why this thinking behind wearing masks and face coverings, including KM1 students, is something that we should be considered. Again, the more students wearing more masks for more time is the safest way to not transmit this disease. So there's a bunch of questions in the chat, and I'm going to try and answer some that are there and call in some folks that are being asked. So there's a question about, am I able to join any of those groups? I'm not sure what groups are being referred to, if it's the reopening group. Those groups, in order to remain a balance, we use the existing groups of the parents, and this was communicated out several times as we form those groups, but those groups have our PTO folks that are already a part of that group. And if you have questions that you want to be represented, make sure you can communicate that through those folks, through the CPAC, or also through principals or through myself. I think those have, you know, we've done a good job of taking those messages and communicating them forward. Are there parent trainings? We can certainly have some parent trainings. One thing that we want to do is, especially about just getting children to wear masks and what school is going to be looking like, I think that it makes a lot of sense to have some opportunities for some parent conversations that's more of a training based. Will middle school students switch between classrooms or teachers rotate? Teachers will be rotating, students are going to be in one place. Will the parents have a say if the student is put in a cohort A or B due to work issues? Like I mentioned before, that we're not able to choose cohort A or B, but I think if you have a particular concern, if you have an immovable situation at work, I would say let your principal know, and to the extent possible, we'll try to make that work. We're not going to be able to accommodate everyone, I'm sure, but the more people that we can try to accommodate, I think that's a reasonable request if it's going to make everything easier for everyone. There are clear masks available. We will be asking students, and 99% of our respondents told us that they have masks available for the children, and as well as for the teachers. So we're going to ask folks to wear mask coverings that cover their nose and mouth. We'll have more guidelines about that. But we will have disposable PPE here available for students if they forget them, if their mask breaks. They'll have other opportunities to use the PPE that we have here, including some clear masks. So if there's a particular concern around clear masks, you can certainly let your principal know. There are teachers that have asked us that they have some hearing impairments, and they want to make sure they can read their students' faces. And so we, from a universal perspective, clear mask everyone can see, and so we do have a number of those as well. So those are disposable masks, but we have been assured by the provider that they can be cleaned and used. So the thought is that students might be able to use those in certain situations and use them repeatedly. Face shields are not an option for wearing a mask. This has been pretty clear from the guidance. I think it may even be on that slide that I have up there, but maybe not. It's not. But the face shields, and similar for the plexiglass dividers, are actually studies have shown that they can cause more harm than good. They provide a false sense of security, and they also can spread more germs because the breathing and the spreading and the droplets stay on those surfaces, and there are more places to clean, and there are more places that could be touched by students. And so those face shields are not an option. Masks are required. And will there be interactions for classmates in different cohorts? There will be some, but it will be somewhat limited. School is going to look different. And due to the virus and the amount of contacts that students are supposed to come in, we're going to keep those interactions and cohorts small. And that is, from a social standpoint, I think that's concerning. I think we'll have some virtual opportunities for students to connect with others. But for the safety, that is one of the rules that we need to follow, is keeping the cohorts smaller. Essential social interaction with choir and arts. Is a child allowed to sing? I was referring to that earlier. As far as those are some of the areas where there are very strict guidelines, 10-foot requirements for something like chorus or band. So we're going to have some plans to do some of those things outside, or to do them remotely, or to do things in person where it's a little bit different. They might not be singing, but they might be learning about singing. They might be learning about history of art, as opposed to maybe creating something. And so our teachers, our experts, are coming up with very creative ways to do this, and to do what we call flipping the classroom a little bit, where some of the band practice might be remote, but the interaction is in person, to do that in a safe way, and to use outside whenever possible. And the plan for phasing it out and going full time, as I said, there will be some checkpoints where we can, we will revisit and look at the numbers and say, are we safe enough to move back to in-person full time? I think that's what everybody wants. We just want to make sure that it's being done at a safe threshold. If a student chooses remote as an IEP, are there plans to check in with those students? Will a parent be able to meet with the special ed teacher prior to students starting school? I think that there's going to be communication very soon for students on IEPs from our special education department about what those procedures and process will look like. We will have, there will be many opportunities about check-ins about what things are going to look like. We know that those services for students, for all of our special education students, getting those services in person whenever possible is ideal. And we're going to try to offer as many opportunities as possible for that. When will teacher assignments come? I'm hoping to have as much of that ready to go with the 10th. I am meeting with my administrators today and again on Thursday to check in where we are exactly with that. First, we have to form the cohorts. Then we have to think about how that works out. We're still getting data from parents about how many are going to be in cohort D. So we're trying to sort all that out, but we're hoping that to have that information, hopefully to be shared around the 10th as well. Extra training for custodials. Will more personnel be necessary? We have hired some additional staffing. We have two new, Wayne Hardacre, our director of buildings and grounds, retired this year. We've hired two folks to replace him. We have one facilities director, and we have one as a working foreman. So that's going to be great for extra accountability. Our staff have received a tremendous amount of training right from March, and that training is about new tools that they're using. It's about, they have some wands and some new equipment that they're using. It's about how to use the cleaners and disinfectants, particular for this case, and even the difference between cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting, letting things sit. All of that training has been conducted as well. We are, in addition to that, we are having additional staff coming in from an outside group to do specific touch point cleaning. And on the safety side, we are hiring an additional nurse for the district who's going to be able to help us with everything from COVID-related issues to regular illness to contact tracing. So how will movement breaks be provided to those students who need them as indicated in IEPs? Additionally, when a student needs to test or work in a separate setting, how will that accommodation be provided? I think this will be best communicated out in our guidance from our special ed department, but we certainly will have opportunities for those breaks in a safe way, in a way where students are able to move about as they need to at a 6-foot setting, and they certainly will be able to work in separate settings as needed. There's going to be premium on space, but there's also going to be some other places that are not being used the way they typically are. So I feel like we will be able to have some of those breakout spaces available. What will remote learning look like if a teacher is teaching the in-school cohort? So I think I've said before that all of this needs to be negotiated with our teachers union. What I'm putting forward and what we've been discussing is if we go in with the mindset that if a teacher is teaching fully remote, I would have my 24 students in my class, and I would come up with assignments that are going to engage my students every day remotely. In a hybrid model, I have some of my students remote, and I have some of my students right there in front of me. So I think if we go in with the mindset of I'm planning this full remote model, and we're going to interact with students every day remotely, then I'm also going to have some students that are in front of me to get some of those essential questions answered, to make those personal contacts that we know we can only do in person. I think we have to think a little bit differently about how our staff are being used. If we have adults in the building, I fully understand that if a teacher's engaging and chatting here in a video and there's 6 kids over here and 4 kids over there, that's very difficult to manage all those things. So we have to think differently about how we're using the adults in the building and how we're splitting up our classes. But I think if you walk into a typical classroom on a typical school day where everyone's in person, many of those classrooms have several adults in the building and teachers are working in small differentiated groups. I think there's a way to do that, whether those groups are in front of me or whether those groups are remote. And I think that's the best model. If that doesn't work, then we do have to think about having separate teachers teaching remote, and that would kick in some other things possibly. I would imagine we may have less elective opportunities for students as we're asking other teachers to teach in those subjects. And I don't see that as ideal. I'm hearing some other schools talking about some of those possibilities, and I hope that we don't get to that point. I hope that we can wrap our heads around that mindset. That said, I completely understand what an ask that is for teachers. That is a completely different job than what they're used to. And to try to think about how you're going to teach both remotely and in person at the same time is a challenge. I think we can do it. I think that's what our 10 days are going to be used for, to help wrap our heads around that. But it's going to be a challenge. What if your child is in either A or B, but the day they're supposed to be in person, they're sick and being kept home? How do we make sure they will not be missing live instruction? So again, that's another reason why we're really pushing the model that we're pushing. I think that one of the biggest concerns that our teachers have and that we all have is that students will not stay home when they're sick. If they have common cold, flu, germs, they're not sure what it is, we need them to stay home. And I think it's pretty clear in North Reading, the number one reason why students come to school when they're sick is they're afraid of falling behind. Our students are very academically committed, and they want to be in school and not fall behind their classes. And so the more that we can look at this concept of, space shifting, whether you're home because you're in a quarantine, whether you're home because you're not feeling well, whether you're home because you're choosing to be home, or whether you're home because you're in the cohort who's not home, if those things are all the same and students are well enough to participate, they're able to connect with their classroom. It doesn't necessarily mean that the teacher is going to turn on their computer in the morning and students at home are going to watch and be looking at the screen for 10 hours a day. That's not going to work either. But I think there's going to be times when the student is checking in to some live, time for questions, time for content delivery, time for collaboration. I think there need to be those check-ins throughout the day that are live and that are synchronous. I know that that's not ideal for some working parents or some parents who want to be able to have the remote program be completely asynchronous so that they can do it, at 5 at night when they get home. That's not really going to work under this model. What's being told to us from the state level is that we need to have live synchronous instruction as at least part of what students are doing on their remote days, and that's going to work. So parents that really want to do something completely different than what we're doing in the school day, they would need to be talking about a homeschool program that would be approved. And so those folks that are in that position can reach out to me, and I can send you the paperwork for doing a homeschool approved program. So my feeling is that cohort D at this time, this all could change, but my thinking is those in cohort D would be a part of the classroom, and they would be making those connections in the same way as cohort A or B when they're not in front of the class. That's my idea. If that doesn't work and we have to do full remote, we could think about a different model where they have just a remote teacher, or where there's even a possibility we could buy into a program that's not North Reading created that those students are part of. Those are not my ideal situations. I'd much rather have it be very similar to what would be happening if we were in full remote and the teacher is working with their original class. The 6-foot rule often, will there be plexiglass barriers? There will not be. In some situations we may use plexiglass, but as I said earlier, there's a lot out there that is actually not, it actually causes more harm than good. The date for a kindergarten call, sometime soon. We're just trying to get through all that we're doing to prepare the reopening plan, but certainly closer to August 10th than to September 1st. But there will be time for folks to make that decision, so we will have that information. Resources for parents for legal considerations for pods. I can ask that question and see what that would be to try and help that idea. I think that pod, I'm assuming that is the idea that I mentioned earlier of, independently contracting with an outside person. Just to be very clear, none of our current North Reading staff can be running those pods. So this has to be someone, if you're going to have someone assist you with remote learning on those days, that needs to be a non-North Reading employee. Teachers cannot be doing that in addition to what they're doing. No employee in our town can be doing that. That would be someone outside of that. So I can see if there's any information, and I can share that as well, if it is available. Is there a contract the school will be responsible in case there will be a COVID transmission? There's going to be some discussion around those pieces, but I think that that is not how we are viewing this. I think that parents have the option to keep kids fully remote if they want to, and I think people know that there are certain risks, obviously, just like there is going to the beach or to a restaurant or anything else that you do. So at this moment, I'm not aware of it, but I'm sure all of those questions around testing, around liability and COVID and waivers and all those type of things, if that does come to pass, then we're going to get more information leading up to the days when the students return. So we'll certainly be checking with our legal counsel, but I would imagine that if something like that comes out, it will be coming out from the state as well. I'm just going to answer this now as I'm talking about it. I can't remember whether I've addressed it before with this group, but I've received questions about, is there going to be a requirement for students to have a test, or for teachers to have a test prior to returning to work? Are there going to be tests available at school? That's all being discussed. There's nothing been definitive yet. I think as a best practice, we would think about imposing some kind of, at the very least, some kind of quarantine leading up to the return to school, where at least that you've mostly been in your house with your household, and you're not, planning a big trip to a state that is already banned and needs a quarantine by Massachusetts law right before you're coming back to school. So I think obviously all the Massachusetts laws would apply, but we would want to have some kind of guidelines in place. I think as far as the testing, we would need to make sure there's enough tests available. If they were to say every student needs to have a test on August 31st or September 1st, for students returning on the 17th, I think there would be just so many students needing a test at one time. I don't know if that's sustainable, and that could be why we haven't heard that. But there may be opportunities where we're able to do tests in different ways, and there may be more coming on that. Would it be possible to engage the incoming senior class before the first day of school to provide guidance and assistance with college planning? Sure, I think that's something we could certainly do with juniors and seniors. I think there's some ideas. I'm fairly certain that there have been remote opportunities already around the college applications and the boot camp. I think we've done some of those things and continued those things, even though we are doing them in a different way. If you sign up for busing but don't want to use it, you should contact Rosalie McKillop or the business office. You can call and get that information. Michael Connolly, our assistant superintendent, can certainly get you in the right direction there. The notification process and procedures for a child or a teacher becomes ill. So this will all be more clear in the reopening guidelines that come out, but we will have a process and a protocol, and they will be slightly different if there's obviously a student or staff who test positive versus I think we're more likely to see up front that, there was a student in class whose cousin that they were with last weekend is in class with someone who tested positive. So I think there's going to be more of those degrees of separation, and there will be some different protocols. I think in the situation where it's a friend of a friend who tested positive, we're not going to be necessarily dismissing the whole school or the whole district. It might be small groups, and it's going to be laid out that way. We will have our nurses and our town board of health working with us on the contact tracing to make sure people are aware of the situations. And we will have a COVID space that's distinct from our nurses space, where children will be able to go if they are symptomatic or suspected. We would have a process to notify parents to come in and pick up their students from that dismissal. Will DESE allow enhancements, changes to the hybrid model as the year progresses? I think that they will be flexible with that. Everything that we're submitting now is for reopening. So I think if we need to go between our hybrid model and go to something that needs to be closer to remote or closer to full in person, I think within those, I think that we will be able to move in those directions as needed. And if we find out that things just aren't working well for whatever reason, we certainly are going to recommit to that and make sure we're doing what's working best for kids and for staff. So as far as the additional Chromebooks, I can tell you now that we're going to be providing Chromebooks to all students in grades K to 12 this year. I had a request earlier for some devices for pre-K that might be different, but when those devices arrive, the biggest issue right now after we've secured the funding is making sure that, as you can imagine, every district is now buying way more devices than ever before, and there's a backlog on devices. We have some devices that are going with students, and we're thinking about how to distribute those and what that looks like. All of the devices will be, they're not all going to be brand new. I'm thinking especially with some of our younger learners that won't be using them as much. They'll be using devices that are still very high functioning devices that are 1 or 2 years old. But we will probably start with our younger learners and give them some of those devices that are, that may have been used by, let's say, our seniors that were brand new last year. So they're fully functional, fully capable devices, and start those with the lower grades that are not going to be using them quite in the same way. But we did receive, I feel confident that we will have the funding to support that. We also have heard from the families that are having difficulty with internet at their homes. Again, if this is just, I could have a better package of broadband, or now that I'm working from home, my wife's working from home, and my 3 kids are working from home, and I need to get some tools to create a better mesh network in our homes. That really isn't what we're talking about. If you can afford to improve your own Wi-Fi connection, you can do that. But if you really can't do that, or if your student needs support, we will be able to provide some individual support. Only the student's devices are going to be able to work on that system, and we can do that as well. So we've been in contact with those families in that situation. One thing we could look to do is offer some support in terms of a forum for parents that want to create a better, some tips on creating a better network in their homes, because sometimes it's about where you place your devices and how you spread out in order to enhance your system. So we could do that as well. A separate forum for special education students. I do think that we will be offering some of those opportunities, yes, because I think we're going to do some separate sessions just for special education teachers and also for some parents. But I think you will be getting more information, and then after that comes out, there probably will be a similar process to debrief some of those issues as well. If there are extenuating circumstances, will cohort A have the option to remote learn on days when they're scheduled to be in the classroom? Yes, I would say so, health being one of them. And students will be able to move. If you're in cohort A or B and you feel that you want to move to D, you'll be able to do that, meaning you're going to remote every day. If you're in D and you feel that you want to come back and try being in the cohort A or B, that will be possible as well. What we will need to do is we will need to make sure that there's a bit of a transition time there, because we have to work out the logistics about making sure that you can safely come back at the numbers into those classrooms. So it might take a few days for us to figure it out, but we don't want it to be that you're permanently, if you want to start the year in D because you're unsure, but you feel like then you find out that, the neighbors across the street have been doing it and it's been fine. You want to transition, we will certainly make those accommodations as well. We've talked about, cohorts based on neighborhoods or busing or different factors. At this time, that's being considered, but that's not one of the main drivers that I've heard from principals as they've tried to make this work. I think I talked about there, as far as a breaking point where the cohort would need to go remote, there certainly is a breaking point. I mean, if we don't have enough adults in the building to safely work with our students because they all have to be in quarantine, then we certainly would need to go full remote. And that may be just one school, it may be one, maybe it's one grade, or depending on where the outbreak was or what the situation is. And that's why we need to be very flexible this year to accommodate remote if it's needed. There may be a separate pre-K call as well. I'll bring that back to my team to see. That does make some sense as the needs are very unique. Will kids be allowed to have contact closer than 6 feet? Will they play together? What will free time be? Is it possible kids have classes in the morning with required breaks and dismissed after lunch? My concern is that 7 hours of the mask is not possible. So right now, that is not what we're doing. We're planning a full day with half the kids at 6 feet distance, as opposed to dismissing those students midway through the day. And if we find that that's not working, we can revisit that. But right now, all of our folks that are involved in planning feel that it is possible to do that. It's certainly going to look different. We want to encourage play as much as possible, but even the sharing of the toys and Legos are things that there are a lot of concerns with what that looks like. I'm very confident that our teachers, who are all developmental experts, understand the value of play and of not just having kids sitting in rows all day and trying to be creative with how to do that in a safe way. I feel like our teachers are going to come up with some great ways to do that, but it will look different this year for sure. And so there's going to be time built into the schedule for breaks and for free time and for play, because we know how important that is for kids, including recess. But they will be in small groups, and they're not going to be intermixing the way they would at a typical recess. As much as it's important for the social mixing, it's more important that they don't come into contact too much. And the less that and the more that they're able to spread out when they're outside, that's another opportunity for mask breaks as well. We're hoping that cohorts are assigned around August 10th. That's the plan. I think I've answered the next question about cohort D. They can re-enroll in A or B. If teachers take classes outside for specials, music, PE, etc., or the classroom teacher takes them outside for learning, do children have to wear masks outdoors? I think that if students are at least 6 feet apart outdoors, they can probably take their mask down, and that to me is a good reason to be outside as much as possible in September and October. As you know, knock on wood, but the Septembers around here are just as warm, sometimes even more warm than June. And I feel like we absolutely can be outside as much as possible on those fall days. And I think a lot of teachers are thinking that way as well. Will there a requirement for staff to self-report if they have a hot spot, if they travel? Yeah, I think everyone will have to self-report. First of all, there's state requirements right now about going to certain states and self-quarantining. And I think that's part of what I will be discussing with staff and employees, that they should not, I'm going to have to work on this about, you're not going to be able to travel to these hotspot areas and then self-quarantine and expect that that's just regular work days, right? If you're knowingly traveling somewhere, this job does not require our staff to travel to anywhere. And so if they're doing it on a personal choice, then that's a personal choice, and there's going to be an impact. So that's certainly a conversation that we'll be having through our negotiation process. The school days are going to be full days to the extent possible. It's going to, what we're starting our negotiations with is that the days are going to look a lot closer to a typical 6-hour, 45-minute, 7-hour school day than to a 3 or 4 hour day. That does not mean that students, whether in person or at home, are on computers all day long. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily interacting constantly with their teachers all day long, but they certainly will be interacting throughout the day in live formats with teachers throughout the day. It's not going to be, if you're on remote learning, you're not going to be at home doing some activities the way it was in the spring. It's going to be much more of a connection with a physical teacher, might be remotely, but live interactions. So the question is, this is all pending, are teachers' unions agreeing? I've had preliminary conversations. There's certainly more negotiations that need to happen, but this is the model that we're proposing. The teachers want to do the right thing. They're committed. They want kids back in person in a safe way. And so, there's lots of conversations. There's lots in the news with what we're hearing about teachers nationally, teachers at the state level, and then we've also got our local negotiations at the teacher level. So a lot can change from what I'm saying based upon where our unions come in, and I think our teachers, have every right to express and to validate their concerns about the working conditions, and it's absolutely subject to bargaining. It's a change in working conditions. Even asking a teacher to wear a mask is a change in working condition that needs to be bargained. And so I'm respectful of that. I appreciate that our parents are very respectful of that. And, I think all of us that are working out there in any job, many of us are working remotely, many of us that are starting to go back to the office, you have to think about what it would be like to then introduce 15 kids into that office. I mean, it's a different variable that our teachers are working with, and I think their concerns are valid. But I'm confident that we will continue to work towards a plan. I was given data from the teachers union that teachers are much more comfortable discussing a hybrid option with 6 foot than they were discussing all students in at a 3 foot. And that's why the model that we presented was the hybrid option. So I'm confident that, we're going to have a good plan. And I think there's pros and cons to every model. I know what I'm advocating for, which is that teachers are basically planning on teaching the same way they would as remotely. I have my 24 students in class. I'm going to plan for that class remotely. And then because we're in hybrid, some of those students are going to be in front of me, and I'm going to be able to interact with them in a different way. And I think if the teachers view it that way, I think we're going to be able to do much more with electives and with students following a regular schedule than if we went in a different way. And that's the mindset that I'm trying to push, but we'll see where we get to. And there'll be more communicated out. If we're not able to do that, we'll be communicating that out. But right now, that's what our committee supported, and that's what we put forward to the Department of Ed. Negotiations are starting this week. So we've had a lot of early conversations. I'm in almost daily, sometimes multiple times a day with our union president. We have a great relationship, and I think our teachers know that we have facilities in North Reading. Especially, 2 of our buildings, 3 of our schools are in buildings that are less than 15 years old. I think that is less of a concern in North Reading than it is in other places. I think that, we have, our class sizes are manageable to begin with, whereas in some districts they're not. So I think we have a lot of capital to begin negotiations with, and a lot of goodwill and a great relationship. And I'm confident that we're going to come up with something that is positive. So, not seeing any other questions. I really appreciate that the thoughtful questions that were shared today. I think there's a lot more to come. There's a lot more information to be shared. The remote learning plan that will be shared on around August 10th will have a lot more information. But I appreciate your flexibility in understanding that due to COVID, due to other things, there may be need for more remote than what we're talking about now. There hopefully will be a return to more in person, because I think we all agree that's what's best. There's a lot more to come, and things are changing every day, as you know, with the news, and so we got to keep that information current. You can certainly complete surveys now that you've attended this, or that you've read through the guidance, and give us that information, whether you're choosing cohort D, whether you want your siblings separated. All those pieces, I think, are key pieces for us in our planning. So thank you so much. I appreciate everyone for being here, and have a wonderful day.